Then I remember being 19, 20, and coming out publicly to my first person, Kenneth, who was a big black, like big 6'2", 300 plus pounds. It was big, like wide, femme. Love Kenneth. We worked at Bed Bath & Beyond together, and I remember telling him he was the first person I ever like officially came out to. Like I felt comfortable enough to tell him I'm gay. He was like, "Oh, okay, cool. And what you doing? How you doing? You live in the UK?" And he was fine with it. And Kenneth like really helped me develop because we talked all the time at Bed Bath & Beyond. We had no real vibes. We were greeters at the front desk, at the front at the front walkway. So you would pass the air filters and the fans, and we would greet you. Welcome to Bed Bath & Beyond. You need help with the conveying thing? Oh, that's aisle, whatever. So we had no like real responsibility. So we just sat there and talked for hours all day long and had a key moment. And that was like when I realized, oh, this is not a shameful thing. Because before that, I was living in Pennsylvania and I was coming back to school, and it was all still very new to me to be out. Even when I was in school, I didn't be like, "Hey, I'm gay." It was, a creeping slowly out the closet situation. But once I came out the closet, it was fine because then I had less fear of people and things and places because I knew more about myself. Even with my family still not knowing about me, I would go to gay clubs and bars and meet more gay people. So I think that having that community in New York City was the starting point for me being who I am today. And I always say, if it wasn't for the bear community in New York City, I don't know where I'd be. And I say that because it was such a diverse place to grow up in New York City. I felt people who look like me, who like people like me, who like people like them. It wasn't a pretentious thing. It wasn't a stick your nose up. Yeah, I'm like gay and you're less than worthy and all these stereotypes that go along with being a gay male in any country. The gay flag, rainbow queer, what do you want to call it? It was like men like me, guys like me who were just enjoying being themselves and didn't have to fit into any boxes that was created by, media. And it felt warm and welcoming. We had white, black, Latino, Asian. It was everything with a melting pot. And I really appreciated that. So that was when I first started going out to bars and getting into these like the bear community and the contests and all the stuff I did after that, which has led me to where I am now talking to you, which I appreciate. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here because there's no one guaranteed anything in life. So if somebody asks you if you want to be interviewed and talk about your experiences, why not? You have something to offer and something to give, then give it. Because if you don't, I'm not writing a book anytime soon. There's nothing being documented about me. Like this will be around for as long as it can be. I have a place on the internet that has, J Light or whatever, and it'll be my little memento to the world because there's a lot of people who have no outlets to tell their story. So I always take interviews like this very personal, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. And ever since we first met, like it was just like an instant connection. And I just always appreciated the fact that you always were going for what you wanted to do. And me being another black person, another beefy, stocky, whatever, bigger, thicker, whatever black person in the bear world, because like actually at that bar that you performed at, we had some interesting conversations previous to me having a party there. Mm-hmm. So when I finally started doing my research and stuff, you were my gotcha moment, if more or less. Mm-hmm. You were my gotcha moment. Like I told you what I know, and I'm telling you what I can do, and I'm showing you what I can actually do. Like even though it wasn't that many people there, that was the most black people they probably had there at that time.
Oh yeah, and I had a blast because one of the things about growing up in the bear community, even though there are lots of different diverse people in New York City, once you start exploring outside New York City, you realize that, we are for sure a minority.
Yeah.
And even going to bear runs, it's mostly white men and Latino men, which is fine. I like all kinds of men. But it was always like a small contingent of black bears. And the one thing I loved so much about those bear runs is that black people and the black guys would always get together and hang out. We made sure that we saw each other, we found each other, we connected with each other, and we did things together, go out to dinners, have parties, drink, all that to make sure that we felt like we belonged together, but in the bigger sea of things. And I can't say that still happens today because I'm not really out there ripping and running like I used to back in the early 2000s. The internet has been a thing, so everybody's connecting through an app. You don't have to go to a bear run per se to meet people. So when I went to meet you guys down there in the South, and it was like a community of black men who were of size, bearish looking shapes, and blah blah blah. It made me feel special. It made me feel warm. Like I love seeing this because we can't experience this everywhere around the country unless you create it. And that's one thing that means a lot to me. So I always think back about that weekend and performing with you guys down there was amazing.
Oh my goodness, you are really pulling at my heartstrings today. What is going on?
And also because my uncle is like his like late 60s and black. And I know how rare that is to have an uncle that old who's black and gay. And there was a period, I don't think even with people who around in our general ages, I don't think because I mean, we've lived through the Corona pandemic, right? But so maybe there is a way to kind of understand what was happening during the HIV/AIDS issue when it first really popped up. How many people died? Like so many people of the folks that we like to read and read their poems and see their work, they died poor. Like you and I are older than a lot of people who we read. You know what I mean? Like they died, like I'm old compared to that. You know what I mean? Like all these people, you know, I've outlived by almost 10 years and we're still reading their work. And so these are the people who would have been 30, 40, 50 when we were growing up. And those would have been the folks who would have made the institutions, that would have made this, who made that. And because that whole generation was, to be frank, wiped out, we didn't have anybody because literally nobody was there. Not because they didn't want to be, because they were dead. And so as trash as it can be, straight folks have institutions that serve as a way to get them practice on how to interact with one another. That, you know, you go to prom, you know, even though it can be trash much of the time, it's still something, you know, it's something. And a lot of times a bad answer is better than no answer. And they have a bad answer. We had no answer. And so what model? The people who we've been looking to, they're in the ground. So look to who? You know what I mean? Look to who? I'm definitely not like the rich white gays who we don't even see them anyway. You know what I mean? So I think that's the thing is like when folks come down hard on the folks, well, y'all just doing this, that, and whatever. And it's like, but think about it. Who is actually, anybody would do just any old thing and whatever if they don't see anything different. And even what they're doing, I'm very careful to make this just like, even if you want to, you know, have sex every way since Friday, that is fine. You can do that in a very safe, holistic way. But again, you don't just figure that. You don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I get it. Where's the model? You know, where's the person that's showing you how you could, like, look, have your fun, do your thing, but keep this in mind, that in mind. Let me know where you are. We know, like just those type of things. Somebody who's been down the way before. And for many of us, there aren't enough people who've been down the way before because they were chopped off before they started going anywhere. And I think that's something for me that's really important. Like institutionally, what's there?
I guess Queen Latifah doesn't count because she didn't come out later because I always knew that she was, to be honest, that I always liked her character, which was odd for me too. But like to put that aside, the first one, Black queer person on TV, I think I didn't see, when did I see RuPaul? Because now I can't remember the time arc between RuPaul and Noah's Arc. Because I remember seeing one song. I remember listening. Now I can't remember, Supermodel. Listening to that, and I love that. I love that song. But I think it was Noah's Ark, to be honest. Because like to go back on what you were saying, I think I learned at 19 that a lot of gay films and stuff like that were based off fantasy and were like based on like our real experience, like how black or white, to be honest, how we actually go through life. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just having this weird just fantasy like. So like yeah, I think it was between RuPaul or Noah's Ark.
1978, I believe. 1978, and it was an episode of The Jeffersons. And George had an old army buddy, Eddie, who had transitioned to Edie. And so that was the first time. And that was also part of the reason why at the time I was like, I guess I grew up and become a woman. Because I was like, I didn't get how to make a man-man relationship. Now, a week later, on, I think it was NBC Soap, the TV show Soap came out. And Soap was sort of a parody of soap opera. So it was ridiculous storylines, aliens, invisible people, all kinds of dumb stuff. But one of the characters who was the most stable was played by Billy Crystal, comedian. And his character was gay, this guy named Jody. And Jody was the first time I'd ever seen a man be with a man. And his boyfriend was a football player. And I was like, okay, prospects in sports. I hated sports as a little boy. So I was like, I'm gonna go look at some sports for some husbands now. So, and within that like 8-day period, I saw a queer Black trans woman who had pride in herself and loved herself and was unabashedly so. And then just within 8 days, I got to see a queer man, a white man, but still a queer man in a relationship with a man who loved him. And he wanted that relationship to come out. Now, here's where it gets weird. So if you followed Soap that year, Jody, his boyfriend, then says, if we're going to come out, you need to have a sex change operation. Again, confusing me and going, I need a sex change. So Jody was gay and then he was trans and then he was bi because the boyfriend left him. He got suicidal. A woman got him drunk. He got her pregnant. And so he tried to be bi. So he was everything in the rainbow. And so that did open my eyes to that. I didn't have love for gay characters until 1981 when the movie Making Love came out. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. You need to see Making Love. You know, I will say, because it was, the time period was so repressed, it was like being in the desert and you come upon a little puddle and you're like, you know, so it was any little bit you could get.
Of course.
Making Love was a story of a happily married couple here in Los Angeles, but the husband is really gay. He's not even bisexual. He's really repressed gay man. He cruises down the back alleys of West Hollywood when he leaves his doctor's office because he's a doctor, and he picks up men in the car, but he can't commit. And then he finally meets this gorgeous actor, Harry Hamlin, who was in Clash of the Titans and LA Law and a bunch of stuff. And Harry Hamlin's this sexy, super confident gay man who's loving him and leaving him. And the guys are sitting up in bed like, please don't leave me. He's leaving him. And I was like, because it showed me that you could then be gay and be an adult, and that you didn't have to be a woman, and you didn't have to be a suicidal, repressed, I don't know if I'm transgender person either, right? Mm-hmm. And so it offered this sort of chic offering to me. Movies have always sort of guided a lot of my sense of myself as a gay man because it's media, right? It is the newer version of books. Unfortunately, they didn't have media, they had books, we now have media. And so that was a big signpost of how to feel, how to think about my life. Making Love is about his coming out and his self-acceptance. And so it inspired me to want a career in television also, as well as how I felt about gay relationships. And then I survived on the drips and drabs. And during the 1980s, let me tell you, every story about a gay person was they have AIDS. And they were probably going to die in the episode or in the movie. Everything said, you're going to die. You are not going to live. having the best friend I had kept me alive, because we knew that there was something to hold on for. And we had promised each other to get old and to see each other as old people. So it was to get through a really dark period. Those two films were a great start, but a lot after was just, and they weren't people of color. By 1986, 61% of cases of HIV/AIDS in this country were Black people, not even just people of color, Black people. And we were not even the face of any ad, in no movies, in no television. It was as if we didn't have it until the 90s. What happened was we didn't acknowledge it till the 90s, and how many died before? We thought of it as Africans, and that AIDS was a white gay man's disease. It's a lot of survivor's remorse, you know, feeling guilty for having survived. And that's why a lot of people push people away. I never pushed anyone away. I lost friends. I lost more friends than anyone should lose. Losing one is too many. And the other thing was, it made being gay and Black not frightening, but startling. I always felt like the 80s were cold. Like I never got warm during the 80s. That the chill wind of AIDS was always in the air, that your sexual encounters left you in a frenetic state sometimes. Even if you had practiced the safe sex, but let's say the condom broke, or there's an anal fissure, things that are jarring, and yet you still want to be intimate. And part of it, really, I believe now, because there's a more evolved generation, is that the Gen X generation previous, we were so confused about sexuality because we could not express it, discuss it, be in forums about it, that we often tried to emulate heterosexist norms in our relationship. And I'm taking nothing away from or adding anything to anal sex as a practice, because heterosexual people do it too, women and men. So it's just a practice. But I think some of us were conditioned to believe that was what we had to do. And then we had to be in certain positions based on our personalities. I'm not rugged, which means really that I'm just not repressed and forcing myself to conform to a societal norm. So since I'm not that, then I have to be a bottom. But how am I a bottom? Because somebody told me I got a big one. So if I got a big one, then I'm supposed to be a top. So am I a top or a bottom, or what am I? And how does all this? So it was really a lot, because there wasn't the information, the discussion, and AIDS made everybody even more afraid to have those discussions. So it sort of kept that going. No one wanted to be frank about what was happening. Now people are frank about what happens in their bedrooms. And there's tops and bottoms and sides now. And and I'm like, go sides, go. I have a dear friend of many years, not that friend, but another friend of decades. And he actually has become a side. He is like, I am so relieved. He was like, for years, the preparation, the this, the that, the third. He was like, I want to be with the guy. He was like, I'm not saying I don't want to have anal play, but the whole thing of it just becomes a burden. And he felt free giving that up. He was like, I don't need it. I done it, great, I don't need it. And for people who still want to enjoy it, fine, it's no problem with it. But the issue is, if you feel like you have to do it because of who you are, you're wrong. Your sexuality is defined, it's a blank canvas. It's for you.
Walter Mercado.
Do you remember the first person of color that was queer?
Person of color, but he is white, like he's Latinx.
So I didn't know that. I didn't know who that was, but I was gonna Google it.
I'll get, like, I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican. I was born in the U.S. Like, I was born in New York, raised here. I've never left the U.S. Right, so like, somewhat culturally, I'm like figuring my life out.
You the melting pot for real.
Right. The melting pot for real. And so Walter Mercado, he is he's white presenting. So like, when you like, I also am trying to be critical and be like, when did I see like a brown queer person?
Well, you can give me both. But his is a
But,
technicality. I see
but
what
I say Walter Mercado because he's iconic. Like in
Cheekbones, Psychic.
Yeah. Capes, the astrology, like, you know, Univision. That was the time that my mom was like, everybody quiet. And then like everybody would get around the news because that's where he would do his like horoscopes for the zodiac signs. And when he was like, Leo, my baby Leo, let me tell you about you. And he'll go off and be like, you got the I would feel the like love. I would be like, I want to be him. like the regalness, the expression, that was like someone who like that was the first person that I wasn't homophobic to internally, right? That I was like, that I saw nothing but light, that I was like, right, like that. I was just like, whoa. I'm trying to think outside of that, queer people of color. And I'm also trying to think like in my real life, like, right? Like I'm like outside of like famous folks. And I can't. Like all I'm thinking about is like RuPaul and like
that's the running that's the running consensus that I've had.
To the sense of like who did I know, like back again, like who did I know that was queer but wasn't out or that wasn't part of the story? It like I'm trying to think. I'm thinking I'm like getting deep into it. But I'll stick with that right there because I think like, yeah, no, besides that, all I'm thinking about are the like judges on Tyra. Like they had Miss, what's her name? Miss J?
Miss and Mr. J, yeah.
Mr. J. And the little gay Twinkie Latino like model-y person. He was like Spanish, like I think he was maybe Spanish, but he had like little spiky hair.
That's Mr. J. Yeah, that's Mr. J.
That's Mr. J.
Miss J is the dark-skinned runway coach.
So then that I was talking about Miss J. Oh, so they're both Mr. J.
That's why I said that.
I thought they were just gender inclusive, so they'd be like, call me Mr. Miss, whoever you.
I know he would be. So he was Mr. J. He was just really J, but he didn't. You know, he's just a butch queen. So he would say Mr. J, and Miss J is, you know what she gives. So
yeah.
Yes, I did. But like they was they were I had one cousin and he was very wild. And then of course I ended up finding out his story. You know, a lot of our older gays, you know, they really have a heavy molestation background. And so, you know, so I
didn't know that.
You know, a lot of times they're the older gays that tell you that's how most of us come in. But a psychologist told me once, like the predator, because you know a lot of you know it's a connotation in the gay community that, you know, that's what makes, you know, us gay and all of that. And I had a psychologist tell me most of the time the predator already sees that spirit, that, I don't want to say gay spirit, that's too churchy.
Well, they see that connection because
they already see, thank you so much. They already see the connection. They already see that, you know, that docile, sweet young man trying to figure things out. And then they go and violate him. They should have just let him go, you know, figure things out on his own. And, you know, and be the older, so a lot of the older gays have that testimony. Going back to that, he kind of had a drug past. The streets really, really beat him up, and so I just said, oh my God, I can't. If I do decide, because you had those little filters like, well, I wonder I definitely had that, the gay desire, but I just see how, beat down and raggedy he living. I said, I don't. I definitely, if I do, come a part of the community, of course, it was an if thing when I was young. If I, go down, for, of course, if I, I used to talk crazy, like decide to be gay. But if I decide to be gay, I got to be different to him because, he was real, he was like the stereotypical gay man. I mean, really, you think I could be flamboyant? I mean, super duper duper flamboyant. Drugs and like I said, remember we were talking in the beginning about stealing the credit cards and scamming and label whore. I mean, all of those stereotypical things that was Tommy, and he bought on his last leg now. And so I definitely, you see those things, of course. Sending good vibrations his way, but I also was like, it also was a history marker in my head, like, oh, I can't be like him.
Yeah, it was my uncle. But again, I had no connection to gay and like sex, romance. I do remember that he had a partner named Norman, and they always talked about him differently. And it seemed like, this seems like different. Like the way, like they're posing together or in the picture reminds me of mom and dad kind of thing, but never really connected, the two. It was also, I had a older cousin, Stuart, who was about 10 years older than me, but we didn't really connect like that until I got much older. And then it was my other cousin, Michael, who, he was discussed as being moody and all these other things, but I never heard the word gay in a positive light. I never heard anything good about it. No situation was ever explained as positive, and everything bad that happened around or to them, so either directly or indirectly, was associated with the fact that they're, funny or whatever. And so that was just my only experience. I had no idea it had anything to do with like sexual orientation or anything like that because it was never explained to me. One thing is too, and on my father's side, I also had an uncle who we're pretty sure, was gay. And I think both of those to me are tragedies. One, because my uncle did so many things that I eventually would find myself doing. Like he was into art. He went to Rutgers University in New Jersey. He got a master's degree. He was into, organizing and activism and all of that. He lived a lot of experiences, all of those types of things. And, because of the homophobia and the issues in my own family that I had to unpeel later, we weren't really allowed to connect. And for a while, it made me very angry because it was like my life was hell growing up, like a slow burning, quiet kind of hell. And there was somebody who literally was a few blocks away, because everybody is a few blocks away in Asbury Park. There was somebody who was a 15-minute walk up the road who understood what I was going through. It could have been a resource for me, a place of peace for me that could have helped me, could have steered me. And that was not allowed to happen because of homophobia. And that really burned me up because it was just like, there is one person that maybe could have alleviated some of this, and stuff was done to actively keep me away from him. So like, for example, when I was in 6th grade, I had art, and so I got put in his class. He didn't treat me any different because I was his nephew, you know what I mean? So doing all the same assignments and everything. Then my mom pulled me out because she didn't want me to be bothered because of the being teased or whatever. And of course, I was still didn't know what happened. I was just kind of like, what's going on? What's happening? And I mean, they were beefing too in their own ways. Like at some point, my uncle said that he called my mom a and, he said he apologized. And I said, well, why? Why did you do that? I was like, when you told me the story, I was like, no, she deserved that. Um, I'm so sorry. Like if the story, the way you're piecing together the story is any type of true, I don't see how, I don't really like gendered insults like that, targeted that way per se, but you know, you could have called her something. I think it was warranted the way she was, that he was being treated. And then telling more about his story about like just the things that he went through, how my grandmother treated him, and all the other stuff. It was a lot. And so it made me angry because it was like, well, there was somebody here who could have alleviated this and it didn't. On the other hand, from my dad's side, it was, he was married or what have you in the Navy, but then he just ran away. He left. And, everybody was pretty sure that it's because he was gay. And they just never heard from him again. Honestly, they thought he was dead. And the only time that they knew he was alive is when he actually died and they found him because they were trying to get a detective to find him when I was a kid. I remember that. But they thought he was dead for years and did not find out that he was alive until he actually died.
So like growing up, this is the part that I knew I was really homophobic. Like it was so ingrained into me that when I saw other queer folks living in their like happiness, I'd be like, why? Right? I'd be like, back to the point of like, well, girls have butts too. So like, what are you doing? Right? Like this idea of like that like this identity is black and white. And it's not the color array in between, the hue of colors in between. And for me, I had to like unlearn those things, right? I had to unlearn as I started, building relationships with queer people. Not because they were queer, but because they were people who like were cool, and then like their queerness would just happen to be a thing versus me like looking at someone from the outside and being like, or like my toxic masculinity being like, you're not man enough. Right. And so growing up, I didn't know a lot of queer folks. In high school was really that era was really when I got introduced to queer folks who like lived in their queerness. Because people, I might have met queer folks and they were like closeted, like who knows. But when people who like lived in themselves, that was like junior year. The like me really learning how and then after that it was like learning how the community isn't going to stay the same. Like that shit changes. The one that you thought was the lesbian is going to be the trans person now. Like the like the right, as people continue to learn about themselves, the fluidity, the like, it's the like, oh, that's not the end, right? So like I'm never gonna stop learning about myself, right? Like I'm never gonna stop learning about my identities and like how far they go and how deep they go, because it's a journey
to navigate that space. My own father, like I said, he's a bisexual man, doesn't use labels, but he also would not come to my wedding because according to my cousin, because he wouldn't tell me, but according to my cousin, he doesn't believe in all that. Now, my father has had many relationships with men and has told me in detail, I did not want the detail, but has told me in detail. He has admitted to hanging out in men's rooms as a teenager and going home with men, having sex with the organist from the church, behind the church, everything. My mother, actually, one of the reasons she left him is she found a letter from his male lover. And so this person says he doesn't believe in these kind of relationships. And my thing is because you still think it's wrong. As much as you say you love yourself, you still think you're wrong. You think you're accepting something about yourself that's wrong, and it ain't wrong. Which is why I can celebrate it and get married. Because I know there's absolutely nothing wrong with what I'm doing. In fact, it's completely right. Because I found someone on a planet full of 9 billion people that gave a fuck about me enough and was good enough for me, and someone I could be good to, that it was the only course of action. But he couldn't see that with his own scope, even though one of his lovers died in bed with him, whom he really loved. Tony, he really loved him. My father, I could tell you all day about my father's adventures in Hollywood and all that. He's done it all. And yet there's still this issue of manliness and correctness.
So junior year, 17 years old, I think he was a sophomore. And I think we dated for about a month, maybe no, 2 months, because like, okay, so we started dating for a while. We went to football games and stuff like that. It was because I think he was in band, and it was fun. I think our first date was at this coffee shop, and we didn't have any money, so we just sat at the tables and whatever. And it was adorable for me. I couldn't stop smiling. It was great. And then I told him I loved him in like 28 days. I will not forget. I remember it's only 28 days. I cannot possibly love this man, and I did. And that made it completely awkward for the next month on, because didn't know what that was. You know what I'm saying? Like, we were just two guys dating or whatever. It was a very interesting experience for me, because me being especially introduced to sex so early and stuff like that. And I've always had my aspirations as a kid was to be married. You know what I mean? Not necessarily the wedding or having an awesome job. It was to be married. You know what I mean? So like, I guess I was already ahead in that aspect for him. I don't know if he even ever thought that far. We wind up dating a few other times back then where he also said that he loved me too. And it was cute. It was cute. It was heartbreaking. But that was like my only relationship in high school. You know what I mean? So I never dated much in high school. So then like after that, I really didn't have much learning to do, or much teaching for dating as an adult and getting into the hookup culture and stuff like that. So that was also weird.
My first relationship, I was 19. And that was when I went back to New York City to go to school. I met a guy on a phone chat line. And because I was 19 and horny in New York City. So, and I never did like, I was telling my friend the other day, I never really explored cruising spots in New York City. It was always these parties people go to when I became of age. So I'd be 19, 20 when I met him. We was doing sexual things. But then again, we had the internet. So we had apps and Craigslist. And I miss Craigslist so much.
I hear a lot of people say they miss Craigslist.
Hey, the Craigslist, boy, woo! That was the spot. But yeah, you had like phone lines and phone chats at that time, and everybody was doing a phone thing. I tried to get into the phone thing, it just never did anything for me. So I met this guy through a phone chat. We met face to face. It was like one of those phone dating things where you had to pay by the minute. And he lied about everything. And I met him, and I was like, okay, I'm horny, whatever. And we became absolutely the best of friends. I consider him a father figure to me. He passed away a number of years ago, but I still, like, he was one of the most dearing, closest friends I ever had in my life. He was older than me, older gentleman, so he taught me a lot just about life and finances. Gave me a job. He was my boss for like 7 years. I lived with him for a while. And it was important that I had someone like that growing up, because I didn't have a father figure per se. My real father and I were not on the outs, but we just weren't close connected. He wasn't in the household. And my stepfather was an asshole, like I said. So at that point, I really needed someone to just be there and explore, understand what I was going through, whatever. And he was sort of in the closet anyway. So it was really weird, because his family never knew he was actually gay. So I would be in the house, and they would bring him dinner. His sister would bring him dinner, and I would hide in the bathroom or living room or the bathroom or the bedroom, and then we would eat dinner together. It was weird, but it taught me that there are things about me that I like, and things about myself that I don't like. And that's when I think I came out the closet. And I started realizing that I want to be out. So I remember after finding a picture of me and him on vacation, my sister outed me to my mom. It was like Christmas Eve. She was in my bag looking for something, and we had pictures.
How old were you?
21. 2021. And I went home for Christmas. We had just come back from Florida for like Disney World. And I had pictures, like the actual photos before digital was everything, right? You had to actually take it to a person and get it developed and get a bunch of photos. And, so I had those photos in my bag for some reason. And my sister went in my bag and found them and told everybody I was gay or whatever. And I said I was bisexual. And then everybody started crying. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. So they finally accepted it.
Woo! I ain't had too many of those, but it just seemed like I always get so close to a loving, lasting relationship. And then it's, these folks here in Atlanta lose interest. But I will say, probably my first loving, lasting relationship, I would say probably right around that 28, 29. And it still was short-lived because it's Atlanta. Be about probably was about a 6 month to a year type of thing. And definitely during those times of my life, the guy was always the aggressor. So he was the one who led. Like I said, some of those old ways that the gays taught us how to view, because I definitely was a greedy bottle back in those days. I could kind of flow now. And that's all. But anyway, back in those days, I was horrible, And so I kind of was like, okay, well, but I'm supposed to kind of lay back and let the man lead and be a little bit more, laid back, whatever. So I let him lead. He asked, he led the relationship. Of course, I cussed his ass out, but I used to let him, lead and initiate a lot of things. Now that I'm older, and like I said, I go flow. I can be the aggressor. I can lead. I can, ask for somebody's number, but I just could not do that. In the beginning, stages of being gay, I just felt like it was just like, let me stay in my lane. Now I want to be careful with this. It can be, but I also don't like to give too much power to, a lot of people be like, oh, things is hard. But a lot of times we make stuff harder than what it is. So I won't give the power to date and being hard. I will say that we make it hard. We make it hard. But it also has to do with, and I love to say this when I do interviews, it also has to do with communication skills are becoming poorer and poorer as we grow. And this is not just a gay thing.
It's society.
It's a societal thing as we go further into this millennial type of age. I would say it probably started in the late 90s, and here we are. We've been in this millennial for 21 years. It's 2021, and the communication of a generation is getting worse and worse as computers became standard in the household. A smartphone became standard in a person's hand, no matter how much they made in the last 10 years. The average person have a smartphone, and their children have smartphones. And so it breaks down old-fashioned communication. So that's what I'll say what makes dating hard. I won't say the person per se. It's all of the forces in a modern day society.
Yeah.
We got to get some things we can't do microwave. We got to get back to the basics.